Cycle updates. The submission deadline for this year is going to be June 26, 2026, end of day. The requested increases when you send in your grant request form should be in line with inflation. This is a message that we have received from Convocation. I don't have a specific number that I can give you. The best I've got so far is to check StatsCan and let that be your guideline. If you do need to go over the number for inflation, then please attach a business case along with it so that we have something with which to form our explanatory notes when we go to Convocation, and that would be really helpful for us. All required materials should be submitted together as one package. I think you're all aware of how we do that now, and it will go to our admin@LiRN.ca email address, and Susan will grab it and track it for us. So please let us know if you have any questions about that process. In the grant request package, you'll see that there's the 2027 grant request form. That's the same as it was last year. The supporting budget, we do have a new template for you to use. That's up on our website. You should be able to grab that quite easily. We've set it so that you can download it, so you'll have the exact Excel document. Any required business cases that you have. And as I said, check on our website for any forms and further details. If you have questions, you can send them to admin@LiRN.ca as well, and we'll be happy to talk you through it. We're making a slight change from previous years regarding excess fund balance proposals. So as I'm sure you probably remember, excess fund balances are where your fund balance, the library operations fund, is more than 10% of your current year's grant. And you're allowed to carry over up to 10%. Anything over 10% is an excess fund. In the past, we had been bundling that up with the budget process. That's a little bit cumbersome administratively, and it also creates a situation where you can't start spending the money until the next budget year. It just makes more sense to deal with that in the current year. So in the coming weeks, if your association is affected and has an excess fund balance, I'll be reaching out to you, and we can talk through what the options are and how you can submit a proposal if you would like to spend that funds. The timing of the business cases, in the last few years, we had been asking for them in advance in an attempt to sort of streamline the process and also give us a sneak peek as to approximately what we thought the final number would be so we could be prepared and preparing our materials for Convocation along those lines. We're discontinuing the early submission requirement and just asking you to submit it with your budgets. We found that we got a lot of requests for extensions, and we ended up getting most of them around the budget time anyway. So it just makes more sense administratively to bundle it all up together. We're tracking capital expenses separately in the budget template this year, so that template is a little bit different. That allows us to clearly identify and review the capital portions of your budget. So if you need a new copier or some new computers, or you need to replace a ripped up old orange chair, you can put that in the budget. It's part of the expenses for the year. We're just keeping it on a separate line and keeping it, you'll see in the budget template, there's two lines for the LiRN budget, so you're just separating out your operating expenses from the capital expenses. It should be quite straightforward on the budget submission forms, but if you do have questions about it, we are available to answer that. We are also looking into whether we can disperse any approved capital funding in Q1 rather than bundling it up with the rest of the grant, which is, as you know, distributed in even amounts over the 4 quarters. So we had heard this year from somebody who wanted to, understandably, spend the capital money in the first quarter to do the replacement rather than waiting until the 4th quarter when they got the total amount of the capital request. So we're going to try to approach it that way this year and see if we're able to manage that. Operating grant funding would continue to be dispersed, as we said, in equal funding installments over the course of the year. But this will allow us more easily to identify the capital expenditures, see if we can get them to you earlier so you can buy the chairs or the computers in Q1 without waiting or having to do any fancy dancing with your budget. The submission process, last time I was here, I spoke about the vendor that we've been working with to acquire a grant management tool. We're finalizing those negotiations now. The goal of that is obviously to simplify submissions and to reduce the manual processing. So in years past, as you may recall, you submit your budget, and then Susan has the wonderful job of taking all of those budgets and consolidating them into one spreadsheet, copying and pasting, double checking, triple checking, third checking, all of that. So this will make it a lot easier. It's been a little bit longer in the negotiation process than we thought. So we're hopeful that we'll still be able to launch it in time for the submissions due date at the end of June. If not, we will save it for next year. And if so, we will definitely be able to offer you some training. The user end is very, very intuitive. It's just basically uploading the templates that we've provided for you, but we will be giving you some training on that. So stay tuned for more news about that. If you do have any more questions or would like to do a deeper dive into the budgets or financials, please check out our website. We've put a lot of information up available there, and you can check it out, or you can give us an email. If it's a specific accounting question, we ask that you use the accounting email address, accounting@lirn.ca. That will allow us to sort of triage it and send it to our accountants for answer. And it's a more efficient way to get those. If it's more policy related, reach out to me or to Susan, because we wouldn't be forwarding that to our external accountants. Just a quick additional word on the budgets. I think most of the people in this room will probably recall that back in 2020, when the pandemic was still new, we kind of had the rug pulled out from under us a little bit, and we had intended to submit and had submitted a flat budget to convocation, and then were requested sort of in a very quick timeline to make some deductions and to submit a budget that was cut by, I believe it was 10%. In the years since then, we've been going to convocation with pretty high increases, and we've been successful in being able to obtain them. A lot of that is due to the people in this room, both advocating for us at convocation, but also the process that you go through in writing the business cases and articulating why you need the money helps us create the case that we need to bring to convocation. As you know, we're an evidence-based organization, and being able to bring that data to convocation has helped us quite a bit. So although we are back to being requested to submit within line of inflation this year, we have done quite a bit of catching up over the past few years. So thank you to everybody in the room who's been a part of allowing us to do that and get the library funding back up to a better level to start from. You'll recall that we had lots of discussion over the library operations policy. We, at this time last year, had a feedback session where we got lots of great notes from everybody here, and learned a little bit more about what you were wanting to see and what was actually workable on the ground. We did a draft library operations policy, which was then given to FOLA and distributed to the associations and library staff for feedback. And so we received a bunch of feedback on that as well. And we've been working through it to make some updates to that policy. So it's not quite ready for prime time yet. There's still a few places that I'm working on drafting, but I wanted to give you an update on where we are with that. So the LiRN board has reviewed a revised draft incorporating the feedback from the network, just to make sure that we were going in the right direction and a direction that the board was happy to be going in. There is work, as I mentioned, still going on in a small number of remaining areas. We do anticipate that this work will be completed by the end of Q3 or the beginning of Q4, so we'll hopefully be able to be in a position to share a revised policy with you in the fall. The goal does remain a clearer and more practical policy that reflects how you actually operate on the ground. And so today, as I said, we're going to just share an update on the portions of the redraft that have been completed to date. So some of the things we heard: strong support for modernizing and consolidating LiRN policies. There were consistent calls for clearer definitions and more flexibility, particularly around the approach of allowing a certain percentage of time for association work before the association contributes to salary. The point was made that libraries and associations work hand in glove and not in silos, and that audit provisions needed to be more specific and include some notice provisions. Just to prompt your memory, the meaningful portion provision that we included to replace that specific percentage of 15% reads as follows. Where duties related to association activities form part of a staff member's role, the law association will contribute appropriately to that staff member's salary. While some library staff time may reasonably be allotted to association activities without requiring a contribution, the law association is expected to contribute when such duties represent a meaningful portion of the staff member's responsibilities. So to dig into that a little bit, we got some feedback. Most of the feedback that we got was that specifying the amount of time is just not workable. That strict categorization between library work and association work was arbitrary, burdensome, and harmful to workplace culture. The relationship between library and association work is symbiotic, and that attempting to split duties into silos doesn't reflect reality and undermines service. Staff strongly opposed time policing, noting it would be demoralizing and unworkable, very understandable. And some associations were concerned that the phrase meaningful portion was too vague. So while we do understand, appreciate, and agree that the work of libraries and associations are deeply interconnected, and that attempts to divide responsibilities into rigid silos don't really reflect how those relationships function on the ground, and that hand-in-glove dynamic truly is a real dynamic. This policy aims to acknowledge that by allowing flexibility where there is blurry lines and gray areas between those two types of work. But we are faced with the reality that the levy that we receive from convocation is restricted by the Law Society of Ontario. It's a restricted fund, much as the grants that you receive are restricted funds, for the purpose of funding library operations. And so we are obliged to distinguish between library and association activities. So using the meaningful portion, we feel, rather than a fixed percentage, gives the policy some flexibility that's really needed to account for a wide variation in how association work arises across different libraries. That's not something that a rigid threshold can accommodate. It's an approach that will ensure that incidental or occasional association tasks don't trigger salary contributions while still requiring associations to contribute, where staff are performing substantive ongoing association work, and preserves accountability and compliance without forcing any sort of time tracking or artificial role separation or rigid limits that don't really reflect reality. Excuse me for a second. So when we talk about meaningful portions, we're referring to association duties that become sort of a substantive and recurring component of a position, not the sort of everyday overlap that arises in shared library and association environments. So we're not tracking minutes or setting a fixed percentage, but we're just trying to respect and preserve the restricted nature of the grant funds that we get that are for library operations. So the focus is on the substance of the work, not the incidental overlap. And a financial contribution to the salary is expected only where association duties, as I said, are ongoing, identifiable, intentionally assigned rather than incidental or ad hoc. Association duties would be more likely to be considered meaningful where they interfere with, displace, or limit the delivery of core or additional library services. Because again, the restricted nature of the funds that we receive, it's intended to be for library operations, and if other work interferes with the ability to provide those services, that's obviously going to be something that we need to look at. Operational realities are recognized as minor and occasional blended tasks that naturally arise in the courthouse library system, wouldn't trigger any sort of financial need to contribute to salary. It would apply where association responsibilities require sustained attention. For example, where governance, administration, or association programming support is a regular responsibility that must be planned for and resourced. So it is by its nature, a little bit vaguely worded, because we are trying to avoid those restrictive, specific numbers. But what we're trying to get at is we need to be able to provide you flexibility to actually operate the library properly and have a strong association to do so, while still respecting the nature of the restricted funds that we get and are accountable for. Feedback on the core library services position. We heard from many associations confirming that they do have the ability to deliver the listed core services, and we're not concerned with the list as presented in the policy. Some large and high volume libraries reported to us that they had some strain from interruptions, walk-ins, and rising research demands. And I think that that is certainly an issue. But it would be one that would be answered by looking at your staffing and requesting perhaps additional staffing or additional hours in your budget request, as opposed to trying to address it within the library operations as a policy. CPD provisions it's a tough one. It is a very gray area. So we heard from many associations that it directly relates to lawyer competence, which is inarguable. It can rely heavily on librarians' research and instructional expertise. It can't be cleanly separated from library operations. It is very much, and in many places, in many law firms that I'm aware of, the CPD department is in the same department with the library department. It does make a certain amount of sense. The issue that we're grappling with right now, and we have not finished drafting for, is that in fund accounting, activities that are funded with restricted funds return their proceeds to that restricted fund. So categorizing CPD as library work, if we applied the proper accounting principles, would mean that revenue from that would go back to the library fund as opposed to the association fund. That's going to be a problem, as I understand it. Many associations rely on their CPD revenues. So that's not something that we want to enforce on anybody, or we're certainly not trying to put you in a bad financial position with this policy. So we're kind of working through how we can manage around that accounting principle and come up with a way that makes it make sense. We had a request to add a provision about service to the public, and I know that most of the libraries don't offer services to the public, but a few do. And some of the feedback that we got was that some libraries assist members of the public, but the draft policy doesn't acknowledge this reality, making it clear how such work is to be categorized. So we did make a minor amendment to the policy to clarify that categorization relates to the nature of the work rather than the user. So if it's library services, whether it's to lawyers, paralegals, or public, it's library services. We had concerns expressed and requests for provisions that would allow longer-term funding commitments. And as I joked with the LiRN staff and board, me too. I wish we could get a longer funding commitment. Unfortunately, we're only able to get the annual funding from Convocation, and we're not able to get from them a longer funding commitment. So we're also unable to pass that on to you, which is unfortunate. And if that were to change, I don't think anyone in this room would object to that, least of all us. But unfortunately, that's not something that we can do anything about at this point. Audit and compliance provisions. This is where there's been a lot of work going on. They were very minimal in the first draft, and we received a lot of great advice and feedback from FOLA and other associations in this room, asking for clear audit triggers, minimum notice periods, limits on how far back audits can reach, access only to library-related records, a cure period before any funding is called back, and assurance that funding will not be interrupted during an audit. So we're still working on revising this section of the policy to adopt these major safeguards while preserving some limited essential flexibility that would be required for audit integrity. That feedback was extremely helpful and was really made my job a lot easier in redrafting those sections. So I did want to take a moment to thank you for that, because it was very detailed and made it much easier to draft, because I did plagiarize a lot from what Ian sent me. Audit and compliance provision. Oh, so as I mentioned, we have included some clear audit triggers and a 60-day notice, use of the independent third-party auditor, limiting the audit primarily to library-related records, protecting funding during audits, and adding a 90-day cure period, and restricting any clawbacks to intentional misuse or issues that persist after the cure period. There's an 18-month audit look-back was suggested, and we would keep that as the default, but in certain narrowly defined cases where material irregularities cannot be understood without reviewing slightly earlier records, that would be sort of a case-by-case basis. That's still in the process of being drafted. And secondly, that while access to non-library accounts is generally restricted, the auditors may request targeted supporting documents from other accounts only where necessary to verify transactions affecting the restricted fund. So we're working with our auditors and financial experts on this to make sure that we're adopting as much as we can, while still, as I said, safeguarding the integrity of an audit process. It's not something I think that would come up very often, but it does need to be explicitly stated. And as I said, it was very helpful to get the feedback that allowed us to amp up this section and make it make sense. We had some requests for clearer policy language. And as I said at the last plenary, having a room full of lawyers go over your policy and make wording suggestions is, I mean, how much would that have cost us if we were paying you all for that? So thank you for that. We made a number of wording changes based on the feedback that we got for that. So as I said, the policy is still being drafted. It will need to go back to the board, and so you'll be seeing a more final version of it that incorporates a lot of the feedback that we were lucky enough to get from you. So again, thank you for that. A few other policy developments that have happened recently at the board. We have adopted a number of internal HR policies at the recent March board meeting. They're listed on the slides, and they will be available on our website. If you're looking for a precedent or a sample that you'd like to use for a similar policy, feel free to borrow and use it and amend it at will. We adopted a communications strategy that accompanies our communications policy, and that happened at the March meeting as well. This strategy includes a comprehensive communications framework that includes standardized network-wide email updates, standard network-wide live meetings, clarified some roles, adding in town hall-style feedback opportunities, which we're hoping to have time to do a little bit of that today, and post-engagement follow-up summaries. That's also available on the website. So turning now to our exciting new project, which is LearnLink, and has been funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario. So we send our thanks out to the Law Foundation for this. LearnLink will lead the delivery of centralized, innovative legal information services across Ontario. It reflects LearN's commitment to advancing access to justice through collaboration, technology, and service excellence. The project runs from February to February, and there is a potential for renewal or expansion. We're already looking at how we can draft our next application to the Law Foundation to extend this project. We'd like to see it last for 4 to 5 years, but for now we're funded for 1 year. There are the following core programs within it: centralized research and reference services delivered through LibChat. And this would offer some real-time support to legal professionals across the province. So the idea for this type of chat service first came up a couple of years ago under the innovation project that was also funded by the Law Foundation. And we did a lot of work talking to library staff. We had a little committee giving us feedback on how it could work. And eventually we were able to see that we needed somebody at least to get the project off the ground, somebody central to do the heavy lifting to get it off the ground, to start getting in some numbers so that when librarians across the system volunteer their time for the chat service, they know what they're getting into, what type of questions there will be, how much time is devoted to it, the volume of questions. All of that was a big question mark. And so naturally there was some reluctance to already busy professionals to say, yes, give me more unknown quantities of work. So we, as part of this project, we had funding to hire a law librarian on contract, and that person will do the initial work of setting up the chat line, of working with the law association staff to figure out how to volunteer for it, how to showcase the association libraries. It's a great opportunity to reach people who may not be coming into the library yet, and that we want to understand what kinds of resources and service and help is available to them. So the law librarian will start the project, launch the project, get some stats in, and then we'll start to invite more collaboration and more volunteers from around the system, and with the idea being that as we launch it out and as it hopefully grows, the bulk of the librarian services will be coming from within the network and showing off what your library staff can do. We're putting together some practice-specific toolkits within our eLearn resources. It will include access to the eLearn resources, of course, training opportunities, links to additional services, et cetera. And then finally, we're looking at some strategic innovation projects around developing original tools and/or content in partnership with other organizations to enhance access to legal information. The key goals, we're hoping to launch 2 or 3 of those projects this year, to get at least the beginnings of the family and criminal law toolkits out. Those would be iterative. We're hoping to get out sort of a basic one and then add to it, because we do only have this first year funded, so we're going to get what we can do done, and then of course to launch the LibChat. Some exciting news that we have hired a law librarian, so watch out for an introduction coming soon. And we are currently considering a couple of applications we've had for strategic project applications. So stay tuned for that. Once the new law librarian starts on the contract, I'm sure that many of the library staff will be hearing from her as she sort of gathers up the information she needs, and as I mentioned before, she'll be working closely with the network on the LibChat service. So you will be hearing from her, and we hope to make an announcement in the coming days. And once again, and always, thank you for the Law Foundation for funding this initiative. Please keep it coming. we would love to be able to continue this project, particularly the strategic innovation projects over the next few years. A couple of just minor notes. Again, reminders that we do have a newsletter. We have a spotlight on courthouse libraries in most editions, so if you want to be highlighted or you have something interesting that you want to share to users, let us know. We also have a section of upcoming educational events. So speaking of CPD, if you want to advertise your CPDs, let us know, and we'll put them in the newsletter. We're happy to have you share it, but we're asking that you not forward the newsletter email directly. So what we've found is that lots of library staff will forward it to their members, and thank you so much for doing that. But if somebody unsubscribes from it, they unsubscribe you from it. And that kind of creates a problem because we don't get notified. We have to go searching for unsubscribed people. What we've also learned is that it kind of messes with the HTML when it's forwarded, and then it looks off and font is everywhere and everything. So there is a link to the newsletter. An online version of the newsletter on our website. It would be great if you could send that around, or better yet, if you could beg your members to to subscribe on their own, because that helps our numbers and helps us show that the newsletter is giving value to people who are reading it. Quick reminder to send updated benefits advice forms to Gallagher, Carol Lanthier at Gallagher, if anything has changed with your employees, salary changes, somebody's left, somebody new has come on, Carol Lanthier should be put in the loop about that. Okay, so that was all of my prepared news to share with you. We'd like to take the rest of our time, which I'm not sure how much we have, but hopefully a bit, and just open up the floor and take some of your thoughts and feedback, anything you'd like us to know or comment on. The floor is open.
Just a little bit over time, but if you do
Is
this on? I think. Okay, all right. So if you do have a question, if you could just come up to the microphone, we'll try to answer it in the next, 2 or 3 minutes, and then Ashley's going to say a few words, and we'll go off to lunch. So I don't want to, stop anyone from
Sorry, I
asking a
talked
question.
so much.
Yeah,
There's just
go
so much going on.
I remember at the fall plenary, there was discussion about changing it so that paralegals would be contributing toward LiRN fees, which in our association I think is a big issue as to whether or not paralegals are participants in our association. Any update on that?
Vicki, do you want to take that? Okay, so that's really not our bailiwick. That's probably a better question directed to Tom, to the Law Society. It's really like we give them the budget, tell them how much money we need to run the system, and then they need to figure out how to fund it. Looks like Alan would like to share.
We will be addressing that issue tomorrow. We have our AGM, and the CCLA has brought a motion in respect of that issue. If you need any information about it, just let Ian know or myself, and we'll get that for you. But we're taking steps towards that, so it's on the agenda.
There was a lot of technical information in Teresa's presentation, so just so you know that it is already up on the FOLA website or the FOLA conference website.
Thank you.
Well, okay. So
and if you have
there.
questions that you weren't able to ask because I spoke so much, I will be here for part of lunch. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stay for the whole day, and I'm not able to attend tomorrow. But feel free to give me a shout. And we're just thinking out loud here, since we didn't have time for much of a town hall, maybe we'll organize a separate one via Zoom so we actually give you a chance to talk to us.
Thank you, Vicki and Teresa. As always, your presentation has been helpful. Beyond thanking you for today, I just would like to extend our thanks for your hard work and dedication throughout the year and for putting up with a bunch of lawyers. As someone who deals with lawyers all day, every day, I can say that that's not always the easiest thing to do, so thank you very much. Something that I don't very often get to say is that Jennifer was wrong. You are not the last speaker. We are going to hear from Edwin Tago of Closer, who is one of our generous sponsors. I did speak to him briefly on the break. He knows that he is all that is standing between a room full of hungry lawyers and their lunch, so he's agreed to keep his comments to 45 to 50 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. And as promised, 35 to 45 minutes is all. Yes, my name is Edwin Tago, and I'm from Closer Conveyancing, and we are very proud to be gold sponsors of your event today. It's amazing to reach out to and be able to communicate with quite a few esteemed lawyers and the various associations. Some of you have already heard of Closer, and many of your members are probably using us. If you have not, we are a all-in-one conveyancing platform for real estate transactions, and our goal is to make things easier, faster, smoother, quicker for your clerks and your lawyers for the real estate transactions. I like to keep it simple. I spoke too much this weekend at my daughter's wedding, so I'm going to allow everybody to get to lunch, but please feel free to come and visit us. Feel free to see us in the galley over there, and enjoy your lunch, and thank you for allowing us to be a great sponsor.